Look at this. We got the crop loss. We got the weather is just going crazy all across the country. I just saw earlier there was kangaroos jumping around in the snow in Australia. Did you see that video?
I just saw the news feed. You know, it's only 5 a.m. here. I just got up around 4 a.m., you know.
Oh, yeah, I know.
So I just, yeah, you know, I'll get up 3 a.m. for you to get an interview on here. That's for anybody. You know, we're in a 24-hour world. I operate on a 24-hour schedule. But I just didn't get up that early to go through the news at 3:45 a.m. But,
right, but
you know, wait till the interview's finished and away we go. Did you also see China has come out right and said that we are going into a 500-year cooling phase. Now, when China comes out and says that, you know that governments are really starting to drip in disclosure because everything is happening too fast. And now it's just apparent that there's something very wrong happening on our planet in terms of what was considered stable. Nothing you've seen over the last 2 days. What stability was. It's past. We're into a tumultuous new era here.
You know, it's so interesting. I titled this, I titled the video, Sun Cycles, Food Shortages, and the Fall of Empires. Isn't it interesting, my friend? Probably not to you, but how many times have we talked about the Chinese, especially, the Chinese dynasties that have fallen historically in the Grand Solar Minimum? And what do you know? Did you see the story? You sent me the link. Did you see the thing with Hong Kong? They have a very tight grip, as you know, on the media. It's not nearly as peaches and cream over in China like they want you to think it is. There's some serious things going on in China. You care to talk about that?
Yeah, first of all, they're labeling them as terrorists, so then they can go in. Like they do with Xinjiang with the Uyghurs, they labeled them as terrorists. So, you know, since the whole world's against fighting terrorism, we really can't say anything now, can we? Secondly, Hong Kong is a part of China. I want to be right and clear with that. The contract that was set forth doesn't give total control back to China until 2047, but they're coming into their own province to try to regain control. And what I've seen so far and heard in the media, so they've sieged pretty much the island. So what's the next repercussion? See, Beijing had gone out and done for the last 2 weeks plus these little 20-minute expose on how Hong Kong is breaking apart, how bad Hong Kong, separatists are. They're being funded by the United States at the Black Hand. Well, they let the information go within China. And this was a double-edged sword because now the Chinese are saying, whoa, you let this go for almost 6, 8 weeks, 10 weeks, and you didn't do anything? You know, you try to put a DDT plant or a xylanine plant or some kind of chemical plant next to our neighborhood, and we come out and protest, and you put the dogs and army on us in 1/5 of 1/8 of a second, yet you let Hong Kong go on for almost 3 straight months.
Right, so it was seen as a sign of weakness, and isn't that very much? And you live there, David. You live in Taiwan, right? Isn't that very much the culture, the Chinese culture, like that? What we just described. They didn't act fast enough. They didn't seem heavy-handed enough, and that is seen as a sign of weakness.
You know, Hong Kong's it. So this is it for the world. What happens here is going to define the rest of our planet. And it's really quirky. You mentioned, every Chinese dynasty collapses during grand solar minimums. But I want you to take an active look around the planet as we spin this globe around in today's world. I want you to look where the flash spots are and look at the flash spots and see what kind of bread baskets they were prior, going back 2,000 to 3,000, 4,000 years, if they had a little more rainfall. I want to truly just do a mind experiment, and wherever you see a flashpoint politically, take a look at what the food production used to be, what could be brought up to be as we move forward, because areas across the planet are already starting to go offline. We saw these absurd, cold events up in Alberta right now, the winds and just loss of crops up there. You've seen the new crop report coming out. So think about it. Xinjiang is now becoming wet. So that Tarim Basin, where China controls out west, is becoming wet again on the 2,000-year cycle. It used to be forest during the Silk Road trader days. We go over to Srinagar and we get down into those areas in Kashmir. That's a breadbasket and a half. I mean, really, that place could be put into full production, become a breadbasket for India. We take a look at what's happening in northern Africa. That's another breadbasket coming online. You look at the saber rattling from Iran to Pakistan to Afghanistan. That area, Indus Valley, was the cradle of civilization because the conditions were so perfect for humans to be there. If there was more rainfall, that desert would be amazing forests. And everywhere you look, just keep going around the planet and take a look. Oh, what's happening in Central Asia? What's happening over in Europe? Well, everywhere you look, there's something to do with food. And I'm going to leave it there. It's a real world, strange world we're stepping into. It's all about the food now, not oil resources anymore.
No, right. Well, and what David is going to, I mean, how is a 500-year cooling period going to affect that? I mean, are we looking at? I know there's been some cases before during other grand solar minimums where I believe that there can be no crop production. Maybe not everywhere in the world, but for a large portion of the planet, no crop production above the 45th parallel. Now, Montana, for example, the whole entire state, as a matter of fact, is above the 45th parallel. That is the bottom part of our southernmost border, pretty much with Wyoming and Montana. There's the 45th parallel, runs right along there. So this whole entire state is above the 45th parallel. Is that a steadfast rule, David? I mean, is that why there's so many people during a grand solar minimum that go from the north and they migrate down south? Is it just simply because they just can't get food? I mean, that's got to be one of the biggest. I know you're a student of history more so than me, but I do know that it's one of the biggest reasons for migrations of large populations, historically speaking, is food, is lack of food and the search for a greater food abundance of food supply for their tribe, for their community, for their family, that type of stuff. Do you care to comment?
We had to think about it when we go back to 1600s, 1200 AD, 800 AD, late Antique Little Ice Age, and then back into the turn of the second millennium, Roman era. We had what we grew regionally. We didn't have this just-in-time shipping, and we didn't have all these resources. I know in the 16, 17, 1800s they had better shipping by sail ship, steamship eventually, but we didn't have that kind of global resource at our fingertips like we do now. So if we trace back through history, it's the first time in a grand solar minimum, at least in these, say 12,500 years, that we have global shipping as we know it today. So the things are going to be a little bit different. But if we do step back in history, anytime that they could not grow food, they only had their regional growth to rely on to feed the people. What could you do by wagon? What could you transport by river 400 years ago? Is substantially different than what we can put on an ocean-going vessel and take across the Pacific, for example. So everybody did leave if they could not grow food. If there was not enough food, there was just not enough food. Economy followed, but food first. So what I've been saying since the inception of my channel, and I encourage you to go back and look at the 2015 videos where I stated, the population migration is going to come. And about a year before, we're into true total food shortages on the planet where we're not going to have enough food to feed everybody. They're going to crash the economy on purpose to limit the migration. And what we're looking at right now is getting very close to that step, because everywhere you look across the planet into the economy with devaluation of currencies, crypto rising, crashes coming here, wars starting, saber rattling everywhere. If it really goes off and each of these individual little regional conflicts goes off, that's going to curtail the entire global economy. And, if China dumps all the bonds somehow off of America and all this gold buying continues, and you saw the silver intake in China. It's stupendous how much physical silver China's bringing in Shanghai. If it were to go like this, you could crash the entire global economy. Nobody else could move. All your credit cards wouldn't work. You wouldn't be able to sell anything. Your house would be locked up. There would be no available quick credit to be able to, spin your house, take the cash, and run to Costa Rica or Argentina or somewhere. I really believe that there's going to be a massive global cataclysmic economic crash about 1 year before the lack of food to lock everybody down so you cannot migrate like you're talking about.
Okay, so let me ask you this question, and I know you've covered this in some capacity. What the difference we have now the advantage that we have now, let's say, that we didn't have in the Maunder Minimum, which I think is the name of the last Grand Solar Minimum. Is it not? Was it the Maunder Minimum?
It was. Dalton Minimum, light one, but the heavy one was the Maunder.
And we think this one may be as bad or worse than that one, I think, is, remember you telling me, right? So what we didn't have back then, we didn't have the technology that we have today as far as the growing technology, as far as the vertical growing, and as far as the ability, the hydroponics and all the different technological advances that we've made just in growing food compared to the last Grand Solar Minimum, the modern minimum. Do you think that technological advancements that we've been able to really accomplish since then, is that going to be enough to secure a food supply for a large majority of the society, or we're just not there yet? Are we just not there yet as a society? Do not enough people know how to do that stuff? I mean, that's my thought initially, is not enough people know about it. But boy, I tell you, if it comes down to eating, people learn stuff real quick. What's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, you kind of answered your own question there. Look at the yields. I mean, the corn yield, we're getting up around 170 bushels per acre. But if you go back even into the 1930s, it was under 100. So it's almost doubling the entire output of a crop in a certain area. But it comes back down to it. I don't care how good your ag is. If the temperatures aren't right or the rainfall's not right, you're not growing anything. And you're right in the middle of the center of the center of the center. Like, look at the farmers around where you're at. Well, what's going on regionally where you're at too? I mean, are people having difficulties? I talked to people in central Idaho, talked to people in Texas, Kansas, out there in New Mexico, and everybody's seeing substantial different changes. Some areas are becoming much wetter. Some areas are drying out. Temperatures are strange. Frosting here, early snows, late record cold temperatures. So wherever you go across the western part of the United States, it seems that there's an abundance of unusualness, if that's such a word, I guess, unusualness in their local regional climates there, the microclimates within states or quadrants of a state. So what are you seeing out there yourself talking to people?
No, it's probably been rainier this summer than I've ever seen it before since I've been here. I've been here about 7 years. It's very rainy. It's not usually rains at all much in July and August. It's usually smoky. At least there's no fires, which is a good thing. I would like to talk about, and you have reported on this, I think, and Michael Snyder has done, I'm not sure if you're familiar with Michael Snyder's work from the Economics Class blog. He's done a lot of writing on this as well. It's coming out in the mainstream now. You really can't. I mean, Zero Hedge has had numerous articles on it. We're facing a potential food catastrophe here in this country. I mean, the breadbasket of America, middle America, was inundated by that one storm, if you remember, that kind of came in, and it just piled on. And I think there's already corn rations. I did a report last week. Matter of fact, when we're going to do our show last week, I think one of the articles I had brought up, David, was that they're saying that they're already starting to ration corn now already. What's your thoughts on the food issue and what we're looking forward to here? Now, this is not going to be a short-term thing, right? I mean, I don't know if you believe we're going to have a 500-year cooling cycle. I'm not saying we're going to be without food 500 years because we'd be extinct. But we are going to definitely have a much more abbreviated period of cold where crops are not going to want to grow. And I think if I remember correctly, David, by your charts, isn't going to 2023 or 2024, they're expecting 100% crop loss? Isn't that what your prediction is? David DuByne.
No, that's Valentina Zarkova saying that we're going to reduce crops globally by 2028, and that'll run for 4 years through 2032 of 50% or less. They're talking about maybe a 60 to 70% decline in global agricultural output 2028 to 2032. But you got to realize from now to then, that's not even 10 years. So each year is going to successively be worse. So what we're seeing this year is just the cusp, the beginning of the losses. So each year is going to get more intense from now. So will the weather pattern repeat again? Will they be able to refurbish the fields in America? Will they be able to refurbish the fields in China? China lost 35% of its corn. Unbeknownst to a lot of people, it doesn't really leak out that much unless you follow Chinese media. But what I find one thing so quirky here, corn rationing starting already for ethanol producers. If China really needed as much corn as they do and they regularly bought from the United States, we wouldn't have it this year, period. We just couldn't export it. So what kind of signal would that send to the global market, or what kind of signal would that send to global awareness of this grand solar minimum intensifying if America doesn't even have enough corn to supply its major number one before buyer, actually number 5, it slipped down in the last year for corn, but at one time the major number 1 buyer. But even to be the 4th or 5th largest importer of American corn, and we wouldn't be able to supply that, And then suddenly it's just so perfect timing coming into the harvest season that we now have this trade war. They've stopped all American imports of agricultural goods. Well, imagine the breathing room that gives us in America on the supply side issue so it doesn't spook the global market that we just don't have enough corn. Now, what you really need to look at is the USDA global, the world total for the carryover stocks and see how much is going to be left. Because remember, over the last couple of years, it dropped from the carryover. It was about 4 years ago. There were 750 million extra tons of grain in silos and storage and around on the market that could be put through the chain or through the pipeline, if you will. This year, 250 million tons. So I'm wondering, where did that additional tonnage go to? And if we keep having these kind of crop losses, we're going to quickly be down to zero in the carryover stocks globally, and what we will have from that point is what we grow that year. And this is where it gets rolling back into history again. And I do believe we're going back into a 2,000-year cycle, not a 500, and possibly a 4,000-year cycle. But again, that would rip the threads of society apart, which is going to do anyway. So as a government planning, debt won't be repaid. You could restart the debt system in terms of consumer spending, the depopulation events that are coming, the social chaos. People have been planning for this for decades now, because you can see how the world evolved around us. We got the police state in there, this whole thing on terrorism. They can jump in and stop anything and anyone in a second. The Western media put out terrorism too much, and now China's jumping on it, going, "Oh, they're terrorists, so see, you can't say anything to us." However, we control the situation. So wherever you look across the planet, it's saber rattling, chessboard piece maneuvering, and a glimpse of history unfolding in front of you. Now, here's the wild card. Governments are starting to come clean and say, hey, we're going into a 400 or 500-year cooling cycle. It's in the UK media. It's in the Chinese media. It's in the Hong Kong media. It's all over Asia. And now people are starting to wake up and go, whoa, what's happening? Why is my food price? Look at Tesco Lotus. I'll come back to that. Thanks, Jim. I just jump on there a little too much. Ranting in the morning with coffee.
No, man, you're fine. I'm enjoying here. Go ahead. Keep going. You're fine. We're just having a chat, brother.
Well, that's it. And I mean, how do you look at Tesco Lotus? This is my newest video for today. You're seeing a pre-video. Hey, it's primer. Spoiler alert. The new video I'm working on for today is Tesco Lotus price rises. Now, if you look at Tesco Lotus, the supermarket chain, they've risen prices on over 1,000 items. Now, a lot of it's doubled or more in price, 25%, 50%. The average is around 50% up in the prices. And when I look through this list here, long food storage, the rice up 45%, the lentil beans up 1.5x, the cheese 70% up. So when we start to take a look at some of these longer term just basics for food storage, canned goods, 45% increase in the green beans. So they're saying it's a shortage in the peas and the green beans. Why is there a shortage in the peas and the green beans, might you ask? They didn't ever explain that. Supply chain issues. And look at the taco vendors now saying they ran out of lettuce. I just got a new screen grab from somebody who sent me a picture that said this particular taco chain, which I hadn't heard of before. It was like Johnny's Tacos or something. They ran out of lettuce. So they're trying to explain to people that they're out of lettuce. Sorry. We're still trying to make your experience good, but without lettuce, you don't really get a full Tex-Mex meal, but we're trying our best. Please stay with us. It's starting to happen everywhere. So the food price rises. If your base stable foods for preparing, this is it, have already risen 45% to 1.5x. Beans and rice are a main staple that people put aside that they want to keep as the base that you can build other things off of for a meal, like beans, rice, and if you had moringa and coconuts, and you could stay alive. If you're going to prep, you're going to want thousands of pounds of beans. You're going to want thousands of pounds of rice. But I can't believe that stuff just doubled in price. That is insane. Right at the time when we're getting ready to start prepping, a lot of more people to get in all these price rises. It's all too coincidental. It's all too quirky. The timing's just too strange for all this to be random happenstance. That was the beginning of my point there. What do you feel? Too strange on the coincidence of all these things happening and supply chains not being pulled and pushed? It's a little too coincidental.
I don't believe in coincidences at all. As a matter of fact, I used to listen to a radio show, and there was a guy on the radio show, the food guy, that would come on and talk about storable food, much like Patriot Prepared. I know you have your own other food, your food supplier, but that's not really the point of this story. But he was on, and he came on. He would come on as a regular guest, and he would come on frequently. and say, once again, the largest customer that we have this month is the government. The government buys us out. Regularly, the government will come in and buy us out, and I mean everything we have, they'll buy it out, all of it. And it takes us a while to get back up again and get caught back up. But, they come in, he goes, and this has happened often. So they know what's going on. They've known for a long time. And I think we're going to see, if it does get down to that, which I hope it doesn't, that's going to be one of the first things they're going to do, David, I think, sadly, is they're going to say, come and turn your guns in and we'll give you food. And when it comes down to starving, most people are going to, I don't know, I think a lot of people would turn their guns in. They would turn their guns in as opposed to starve, especially if they have a family. But that could be one of the things that they try. There are camps all over. I don't want to sound like doom and gloom, but these are realities, folks. I mean, these things really exist. Are we going to go there? I mean, I don't have a crystal ball. I don't know the future. All I know is what David's saying, it's not just coincidental. It certainly seems like all the pieces seem to be in place for something like that to happen. Now the last item was the food going up. But, silver's going up too along with it, right? And Bitcoin's going up as well, I mean, generally speaking. So maybe that's just, and there's another stealth inflation too, David, where the price remains the same, but the quantity gets less. So instead of a 4-ounce bag for $6, now it's a 2-ounce bag for $6. You still pay the same $6, so technically your grocery bill doesn't go up, but you don't have nearly as much food in the cupboard when you get back home.
Shrinkflation.
Yeah.
Our least favorite word.
Is that what you call it, shrinkflation? It's true.
I just did a thing about the coffee in the UK yesterday. They standardized, they subtracted 4 ounces, and then they added 10 pence to every cup sold. So what the small was, so the medium's now your small, but you're paying 10 pence more for it. And I just did that story yesterday. The UK seems to be having a few problems. And again, what's this with all these power outages going across the planet? Unexpected power outages across the UK, both the gas fire power plants and the wind both went down at the same time, unexpectedly. Oh, they don't know why. But I'm telling you, there might be something electromagnetically as the pole shifts on one side of the planet. Perhaps on that opposite side, we're starting to get that little pinpoint wherever it rolls across the city or whatever could be lines, high tension delivery lines, wherever that pole is trying to balance on the other side, perhaps on the other side of the planet, there's an electromagnetic effect. And this is truly why we're starting to see all these power outages. It's a possibility. I'm looking into it more. There's just something, especially on the southern pole. That southern pole is going to be matching with our northern poles as it's moving too. So as it moves around, look where the power outages are and see in the direct side, on the other side of the planet, was there something with an electromagnetic or magnetic pole movement that was reflected on the other side of the Earth? Too strange. All this is happening at the same time. Internet outages, power outages. Why? What's going on right now?
Well, and we haven't even discussed the increase in earthquake activity, the increase in volcanic activity. That folks, we have to close this mail so it doesn't keep making that noise. Folks, if you understand, the things David's been saying for quite some time are coming true, and we are looking at. I mean, we're looking at David. We're looking at. I don't know. I think in us, most people that are alive today, of course, no one that's alive today has ever lived through what we are coming up against. And if we start having the type of earthquakes like we had back, I think, was it 1812, where we had that last really bad earthquake where they say the Mississippi River flowed backwards. We start having those type of events down there in Missouri, and I can't remember the name of that fault down. It's not Arcadia. The name of that
New Madrid.
New
Madrid fault.
We've talked about this before. That is a red flag. You want to talk about red flag laws? That is a red flag warning danger zone right there in the New Madrid. I mean, you understand the population density is magnitude greater than it was before. And folks, not being doom and gloom, not trying to be scary, but we can expect. I mean, for how long, David? How long are we going to have this increased uptick? And based upon your research, we know that already the earthquakes have been increasing. We're going to see more tsunamis as a result of that, more volcanic activity. We've seen a lot of activity down at the Yellowstone, not very far from me. How long is this uptick in these earthquakes and stuff expected? Does that last through the full duration of this Grand Solar Minimum, or does that kind of peak and valley, kind of like with some of the other stuff?
You know, John Casey is the expert on that. I have read and talked to him. They can't find the pattern on when it comes in, this either uptick in volcanoes, the eruptions, or the earthquakes. So when you're coming into a Grand Solar Minimum, the sun's been at really high activity, so electromagnetically with our Earth, you know, they're both at super high charge. The sun steps down and the Earth's lagging, so it's got to dissipate its electrical charge somehow, and that is reflected in the crustal movements in the volcanic activity. Some of these strange, bizarro things we're seeing in our skies, like these nonstop flashing lightning storms, ground of sky lightning, the sprites, the blue jets, and all these things, these plasma displays, this plasma filament rope that's been cited since 2017. We're starting to see a lot of electrical activity, but that is what causes the volcanism and the tectonics, is that. So John Casey's really the expert. Yeah, I encourage you to read this book, Upheaval. But if we are looking at the duration of the Grand Solar Minimum, we are going to be looking out to about 2035. And it's not doom and gloom. It's more about understand the problem, know that people have lived through this every single time. Not everybody's going to die. No way. Not even. Only 25% of the world's population will perish during this time. Maybe 30, but that gives you a 7 out of 10 chance of living through it if you slightly get prepared. It's about finding the solutions during this time and offering the most value for those during the transition period, and then working through it like this. So are some of these new red flag laws, are those for people that are going to be starting up militia or starting to organize their neighborhoods or starting to organize other people, and that's how they're going to be able to legally flag you because you're the ones that won't turn in the guns, you're the ones who are going to be growing food, you're going to be ones that are prepping and storing and creating neighborhood resistances against the outside forces. I mean, it's all intertwining again. This strangeness of the timing of everything. It's just too much for me to believe that it's randomly organic. So as we move the timeline down, the timeline for global awareness for me, 2021. Everybody on the planet will understand today's conversation like Jim and I are having. Even the school kids will understand it because their teachers are going to teach them in school what it is. 2021. Global awareness is that everybody understands. At that point, how do people respond? This is maybe why we have the police state that's put out since 9/11. Gave us a perfect excuse, terrorism, whoops, now there's a police state. You didn't even blink twice thinking about the installation of all the cameras, all the tracking, all the police, militarization of our police. You didn't even think about it. Well, it's here now to control something. I think the something is the Grand Solar Minimum and the mind of the people, the way they'll behave, because they already mapped out human behavior. They know what's going to happen when people get hungry. Now they've already have something in place. The bear trap's going to snap shut on it.